You're listening to Leeds Student Radio. It's 3 o'clock on Thursday the 7th of February. Good afternoon, this is Nicky Bremner and Alex Monk, and joining us today, Rob Cahill, and you're listening to Sexy Syntax! Hello, welcome back to the second episode of Sexy Syntax. This week we'll be discussing political correctness, namely Barbar Rainbow Sheep, LGBT History Month, Cripple, Firefighter, Visually Impaired, Festive Period, Thought Shower, and dual heritage. We will discuss later on LGBT and queer. Which is correct? Is LGBT correct? We hope you look forward to listening. Thank you. Indeed, you're listening to Sexy Syntax. And of course, we'll start then with Barbar Rainbow Sheep, in case anyone's wondering what I'm talking about. About 6 years ago, it was suddenly, well actually longer than that, it was considered politically incorrect to continue to say Barbar Black Sheep, as in the children's nursery rhyme. So they replaced it with quite a cringeworthy version. Let's hear it. Let's have a listen.
Okay, let's listen.
Barbar Rainbow Sheep, have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. 1 for the master and 1 for the dame. 1 for the little boy who lives down the lane.
There we have it, Barbar Rainbow Sheep. Now, people say that's a more politically correct version. However, given that it's LGBT History Month and there's rainbow flags everywhere, maybe there's a subtle subliminal message in there saying that these rainbow-coloured sheeps are homosexual or lesbian sheeps who are being excluded too. What do you think, Rob?
I don't know whether it's just this poor sheep has been replaced with a rainbow sheep because it seems, I don't know, as we said, more politically correct. But if you listen, the words haven't been changed. So we've still got this kind of inherent slave-master relationship going on. I'm not sure that the colour of the poor sheep's wool makes any difference.
Yes, I agree, and I think maybe this whole idea of the rainbows, they thought they'll get away with it, they'll play it safe by saying we're using the rainbow, that's every single colour, it doesn't matter whether we say blue, green, pink, mauve, whatever, no one's going to be discriminated. But yes, there is still the dame and the master and all of that. So yeah, that's Barbar Rainbow Sheep. And it's funny, I've just discussed LGBT. In fact, I kind of subtly mentioned it last week. LGBT History Month now. We're lighting up the Parkinson Building mauve every night for the next month. But should we have an LGBT History Month? Should we have this one exclusive? It's the same argument as Black History Month. I mean, what do you think, Nicky?
Well, we have the idea of political correctness, and why does political correctness exist? And are we going over the top? They're the main topics for discussion, aren't they? And I believe that, well, I'm not sure actually what I believe, because the sort of theory of political correctness in itself, we must say that it's a good thing, don't you think? Because political correctness is about making things fairer, it's about eliminating stereotypes, but perhaps the way that we're going about it is a bit hypocritical, because we're just focusing on one thing, and we might not get the right word. The word that we use might end up being in itself unpolitically correct.
Yeah, you hear people saying PC, for example,
yeah,
as a term. Yeah, but what about this idea of having a dedicated month for a particular group of people? I mean, we've got Black History Month. Do we have White History Month? Do we have Asian History Month? I mean, what's your
well,
views?
It's the same thing about, for example, International Women's Day. We do focus on women because they've been, traditionally repressed over the years, and these and so we look for a way of representing them and making them feel that they are equal. But it's quite hypocritical in a way not to have then also a Male History Month, or it's not Male History, is it? It's just Male Day, Men's Day, or Women's Day.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we need a month. I think we do need a month. I think it's right to have a month, just to spend, how many days have we got of February? It's 28 this year, so spending 28 days just saying
let's celebrate, let's remember as well. We spend, I was probably wrong to associate the month of November with the month of February, but it's the month of November is a time to remember, and I think having these months helps to stimulate debate, look at what's going on, look at what has happened and where we're going, and to celebrate diversity. I think it's right that we do highlight that we have these groups of people who are minorities, but we live alongside each other, and we have to celebrate our differences as well as, kind of make amends for the past. As we've said, that's one reason why these kind of things happen, but I do think they're very important to have.
Yeah, and not least to reflect on particular historical figures as well, such as Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela. And they're two people who always crop up every year in Black History Month as part of the school curriculum. But what Morgan Freeman argues, he says, well, I don't want there to be a Black History Month. I want Black history. Well, I want to establish the fact that Black history is American history. Black people, white people, it doesn't matter. Black history is just as much a part of American history. And of course, we're using the USA here as an example because that's where Morgan Freeman's based. But it doesn't matter. Why should colour of skin matter? If it's a historical moment, it doesn't matter whether Henry VIII was white or black. It's obviously there's politics involved, but
yeah, I think that's an important point because when we're sort of separating them into their own specific groups, it does cause problems because we are then really making it obvious and clear to the world that they are different. Now, what Rob said about diversity is right. We need to celebrate diversity, but at the same time, we are putting them in a stereotype, aren't we? And we're defining them as different. And isn't the whole point of political correctness to make it clear that everyone is the same, although they're not the same?
Well, I think my response to that would be more that the Black History Month, for example, is more of an opportunity for those people who have, suffered, and we went through what we've just said, the history, is actually for that history to be told from their perspective. I think it gives a platform for that to come forward. Obviously, you can't tell American history without telling Black history. That's something you can't separate them. They are the same thing. But I think it just gives that platform for people to come forward and say, actually, this is it from our point of view. This is how we see it. I think that's still a very important thing to have.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And also, I think we're in a good position now with Black History Month. I mean, it gets stronger every year, but an LGBT History Month does too. But I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite convinced the historical aspect of LGBT History Month is still coming through to the masses. And obviously, sure, at this university, you go into the union and there'll be quite a lot of events on. But what about the actual historical side of things? Is everyone clear with what does LGBT mean? Because the acronym is often extended to LGBTQA, the Q standing for questioning, those people questioning their sexual orientation, the A standing for accepting or allied, and that could be anybody, women included.
Like me.
Anyone who accepts homosexuality would be the LGBTQA.
Right, so that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
So someone who really feels that there should be, for example, more gay rights or, better conscience of this issue, but I'm not personally homosexual, but I can be part of it. Is that what you're saying? Yeah,
I mean, but this acronym's not actually used that often.
So what is the acronym? Do we know here?
Rob, go for it.
Well, I was going to say, it's LGBT is the standard, but then we're exploring these different ways of those people who identify themselves as transgender. Do we use the word transgender, or do we use a star, or do we use T star? There's lots of different. I mean, if you look through, for example, the lead student over the past couple of months, you'll see this has been quite an issue, and there are many different acronyms that have appeared and many different ways of expressing this now. And I think we just have to be quite sensitive to what the group that identify themselves as being traditionally LGBT may have a completely different definition that they wish to use. And I think it changes by location or the reason for association with that category. There might be something that means they don't want to use the T, or they might want to
Yeah.
add the A in, or
Yeah,
there's all
you
sorts
often
of
see
different.
I mean, the T is often omitted actually, and it's sometimes just LGB. And the L usually comes first as well, like ladies first. And just to absolutely clarify to everybody listening, just in case there's still some people confused, LGBT stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or transsexual. And like we've been discussing, there's also a star. Is that in the form of an asterisk, I'm assuming?
Yeah, an asterisk. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Q doesn't always stand for questioning. It sometimes stands for queer, because queer's often used as an umbrella term to celebrate all diversities of sexual orientation. But on the other hand, queer is often seen as an offensive term. I mean, if someone called somebody who's homosexual queer, they might take offence to that and see that as an offensive term. But on the other hand, queer is sometimes used just quite blasé. For example, Queer as Folk, the television programme which broadcast on Channel 4 back in 1999 and is still available on 4OD. I'd give it a watch if I was you, but it's called Queer as Folk. Now, back then I would have thought the word queer was even more of an insult than it is now. What's your stance on it, Rob?
I find it quite an offensive word. I don't like it. I suppose the definition that I've always seen to go with queer is something that's wrong and mildly disgusting. So I don't like the use of that word at all. And I would be very surprised if groups who identified as LGBT would choose to put a Q at the end. I feel I think it's a word that a lot of people who identify as being gay or bisexual or transgender would find quite offensive still. I don't think it's one of those words where, not to say it's a taboo word, but it's one of those words which for a lot of people has a very negative connotation.
Well, for me it definitely does.
Yeah, I don't think that
Yeah, that's what I
connotation
was
has
gonna
gone.
ask, actually,
I
yeah.
don't think that's a normalised word yet. I don't think it's something that we can just sort of bound around in normal conversation without someone taking offence.
Just to enrich your point, Rob, I was doing a little bit of research about the way that political correctness has evolved, and I was reading a bit of work by Edna Andrews. She was talking about this concept that how important the language is. I mean, Rob said that it's really important that we choose the right words for. And there are people that want to make sure that these letters LGBT are the correct words. They really feel strongly about it, because through language, we are able to really change the thoughts of people, and through that we can change culture. And language is really important. Now, I think people that say that political correctness has gone mad, the Daily Mail. I mean, I can see why they feel like that, because it does sometimes sort of blow your mind that you can't just say something because you're scared to make a mistake and you can't say this and that. But it's there for a reason, because language really does change our culture. If we change the way we speak, it will, well, according to Edna Andrews anyway, it will start to change our culture. So if we decide as a culture that we want to be multicultural, we want to be diverse, we want to be tolerant to different people, different sexualities, we want to be open-minded, then we have to change. We have to be absolutely 100%, have a no-nonsense policy towards political correctness.
Yeah.
So the word queer, it's very interesting that some people think that queer is fine, and they want to have it in the acronym. But some think, I think quite reasonably, that it's, why would you have a negative word if that's what we don't want to have the connotation of homosexuality or any of the aspects in that umbrella term as a negative connotation.
No, and as Rob says, it is perceived as negative, and also people think of queer as well as quite like someone's confused, and there's several negative connotations on that. So I mean, that was the main sexual part of the show, which we've done earlier than we normally would, but because it's well integrated into the political correctness debate. But I think we're now going to go over to gender and talk about different job occupations which have changed. I mean, obviously we've got the obvious one, police officer. We don't say policeman anymore. We don't say policewoman. We say police officer. Likewise, chairman. Do you say chairman or chair or chairperson? Never chairwoman. And I think, Nicky, you've done a little bit on firefighter.
Yes, I was looking at a firefighter, and this is an interesting one because fireman is the one that was traditionally used, and that is now is politically incorrect. And we have I've written down fight fighter, but I really want to say firefighter. But there's an issue with this as well, that the real sort of gurus of political correctness, or correctness, shall we say, are saying that changes the actual meaning of the word, because fireman is someone that is a man that deals with fire, that has something to do with fire. It doesn't necessarily have the connotation that they are fighting fire.
Yeah. You know, if you think of all the different roles that the fire service provide, they're not just fighting fires. A lot of their work is to do with education and fitting smoke alarms into vulnerable people's houses, things like that. Getting out into the community, they're not just fighting fire.
Yeah, and it is this idea that you cannot please everyone. There is always going to be some people that will say, no, you're not right, that's not correct. This isn't exactly what we want to mean by that. So it's very difficult. It's a very difficult topic, I would say.
Yeah, I think it is, and it's the same for saying visually impaired instead of blind, and also vertically challenged instead of short. Although vertically challenged, I wouldn't say is political correctness. I'd say that's people making more of a joke.
Yeah.
But certainly visually impaired. I think to be honest, I think visually impaired is quite a pleasant term. I don't. When I hear the term visually impaired, I don't think, oh, political correctness gone mad. I think it is quite a nice term to use. It's quite a functional term, actually.
I'm just wondering whether that's more of visually impaired is used more on a scale. So if someone has total no sight, surely we'd use the word blind.
Yes, surely.
Yet someone with a visual impairment is someone who has some sight but doesn't have the whole sight. So maybe it's not as correct to use the word visual impairment for someone with 100% no sight. I don't know.
It might want to be an umbrella term again for everybody who has issues seeing.
Which is pretty much everyone anyway, because I don't think anyone's got perfect.
Oh, but then we're really on eggshells.
Well, I would say I have better than 20/20 vision. I've been told.
I've heard you say that before,
yes,
Rob. Yeah.
Yes, so I can take myself out from under that umbrella.
Yeah. So you're non-visually impaired.
I am non-visually impaired. Yes.
Should we talk about the?
What about cripple then?
Yeah,
because
I was reading a bit about this, about the how cripple has evolved. Cripple has gone from sort of a very negative colloquial term from a number of years ago, which is probably still used by many people, but it's a lot more accepted to say something along the lines of handicapped. But now that's not even allowed, and we've sort of evolved into disabled,
which is a very broad term.
Yeah, very broad.
Very broad.
Yeah, and then we've got now the absolute modern ones are physically challenged.
Oh,
they
right.
have a challenge
I've not heard
to
that
their
one.
physical
state,
and then the sort of year 3000 will we be saying differently abled. Well, not the 3000 actually. It's some people do say that, but not many. I would
differently abled.
Well, it's trying to say, that even though they have these problems with, they can't walk or whatever, that's just a different thing. It's just different. It's not a negative thing. Why is there this obsession with not wanting to highlight people's
difference?
Yeah. But it is. I mean, being disabled, or shall I say, physically challenged, it's a negative thing, isn't it?
But I think you just have to make it positive, don't you? Because if you're having to live with that disability, you just. But I think people don't mind as much now. I don't know if anyone watched the comedy 2012 last year, and they would make joke buzzwords like inclusivity and all of that, and I think people just have a laugh about it as well. There's an element of that, and it's just like, it's fine. Everybody's got varying abilities, and there's all these wonderful buzzwords in all these different corporate companies, which kind of all these politically correct terms, like multiculturality was one they made up on 2012. It's fun,
Yeah.
And dual heritage and
Do you think that political correctness has gone mad? Do you feel that you are walking on an eggshell every time?
I don't know. I'm not sure I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I think when you're around someone who has who is different, I think after talking to them for about 30 seconds, you'll know to what extreme they would like the political correctness to go. So there will be some people who are disabled who would want to be called disabled, or they might prefer physically challenged, as we've already discussed. But I think, you get a very quick sense of to what extreme people are offended or upset by certain terminology. I think you just have to ask people, really. I don't know whether it's gone mad. I just think people have to be really, really conscious of that some people do take offence to certain words and certain terms, and there are other ways of describing these differences.
Yeah, and I think so, and it also depends as well. Like, I think police officer and, like we say, firefighter, even if the word fighter is not necessarily the most apt, at least, I think there's everyone accepts that, and they say, yeah, I mean, why should you say chairman? Obviously there's a history behind it, and yeah, we kind of want to make sure it's all inclusive. But I think things like thought shower replacing brainstorm, I mean, that's a little bit silly. And I don't know if anyone's aware of that. Yes, okay, forget mind maps and spider diagrams, they're separate. When I use the term brainstorm, as they do, for example, in BBC's The Apprentice, they say we're going to brainstorm some ideas. Doesn't necessarily mean you draw out a spider diagram. You're just simply getting loads of words and different ideas and kind of bringing them together. But of course, you're not allowed to say brainstorm anymore, even if they do on The Apprentice. You're supposed to say thought shower. And I think, it just gets to the point where you're like, really?
Yeah, and I was reading an article as well that was talking about has the humour gone from Britain? Do we, we can't say anything because we're scared of I know, I'm not saying make fun of disabled people or something, but you're so scared to say anything about any sort of. I mean, I was reading that you can't even do the Englishman, the
Irish, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yes, apparently that's really offensive, but.
Well, of course it is, yeah, but I mean, you could argue that it's just a bit of fun.
It's a bit of light-hearted humour.
Yeah, that's based on a stereotype, absolutely. But yeah. And I was actually reading as well the CAPC, which is the Campaign Against Political Correctness. So there's an organisation which has highlighted a lot of people that have actually been victims of political correctness. So there's a lot. I mean, people that have been sort of humiliated in society. They're now being rejected by society because they've made some sort of mistake. They've said thought shower instead of.
They said brainstorm instead of thought shower.
See, I don't even know.
It's so difficult to do.
Yeah, or they've said black, for example, when they should say I'm African American. Now, I don't understand the black thing personally because black people that I know aren't black, and we're not white.
Exactly.
So I mean, if we're going for correctness, then
yeah, Nicky, you're beige.
I'm orange.
Okay, well, I think that ends the political correctness part of the show. And as we say, we've already brought the sexual side of things into it with LGBT queer, and we're going to end on our usual pronunciation section. And there'll be 3 words, and we'll start with the top word then.
Pastoral.
No, it's just really hard to do after someone, but I'm going to try to be as objective as possible and neutral.
Go with whatever you say.
Pastoral.
And I say pastoral. Now, the correct way of saying it's all about stress on the syllable. It doesn't matter whether you say pastoral or pastoral, because if you're northern, you tend to say glass. Newcastle, pastoral.
Oh, that's rather a glossing.
It is a glossing term,
people
but
in the north speak like that. I think.
Doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. And it's again transport. I usually say transport. But with pastoral, yes, it's all about the stress, because Nicky and I both said pastoral or pastoral, but Rob said pastoral, and we're tending to see this shift now towards putting the stress on the second syllable. Everyone's saying pastoral care and all that kind of thing. Yeah. But really,
what does pastoral mean?
Well, actually, that's a good one, because when you look it up in a dictionary, it tends to have 2 definitions. One being, animals on a farm, or farmyard, countryside life, pastoral farming. The other definition tends to be, in every department at this university, we have a pastoral supervisor who's in charge of delivering high levels of pastoral care. There's many channels you get pastoral care through, the Equality Service, the Student Union, Student Advice Centre. Pastoral, yeah, it's about dealing with welfare issues. It's about dealing with personal security. It's about dealing with emotional issues, and it's also about dealing with general discipline issues too.
Right, well, thank you for that. Yeah.
The university does have a disciplinary procedure. I kid you not. Second word on the list.
Kilometre.
Kilometre.
Kilometre. Okay, so now this is an interesting one. Rob and I both said kilometre, but Nicky said kilometre. You'll find a lot of people from Canada, especially given that they use the metric system over there, they say kilometre as well. They put the stress on the seconds. Yeah, kilometre, as if it's a measuring instrument, because you use a thermometer to measure, thermal, temperature. You've got a barometer to measure pressure. You've got a speedometer to measure speed. So surely a kilometre means that you're measuring how many people have been killed, which is not very nice.
That's a very good
observation. Whereas units, millimetre, centimetre, micrometre, kilometre, and to measure a micrometre you use a device known as a micrometer. And again, kilogram, kilobyte, kilolitre. The stress is always placed on the first syllable. So why do people end up saying kilometre? I think the first time I heard the term kilometre used was on a sat-nav, and it must have been about 10 years ago, and I'd always said kilometre up to then. And then one day I was, in a sat-nav, and it said in 2.5 kilometres, turn left. And I suddenly thought, actually, have I been saying it wrong all these years? So I actually changed to kilometre for a little bit.
Oh, God, you changed.
I changed. But then I changed back when I found out that actually it should be kilometre. I mean, Rob, why do you say, you're another one who says kilometre, but surely with you've got all this peer pressure around you, all these lecturers saying kilometre, why haven't you changed?
Kilometre, were we in the University of San Diego or something?
We've got loads of, all of them say kilometre.
Yeah, ITS are down
apart from Jeremy Toner.
Yes, apart from Jeremy Toner. No, I've always just said it, that's the way I was taught to say it, so everyone that I've kind of been around has always said it as well. So, and
you'll find Jeremy Paxman says it, and he's and David Attenborough even more the epitome of correctness. If you love David Attenborough, if you've been watching Africa, that lion is a kilometre away. No, he doesn't really say that. Everyone knows he says miles, but he does say kilometre. So Top Gear's another one. You've got Richard Hammond who says kilometre, but you've got James May. Everyone loves James May. He says kilometre. Jeremy Clarkson, well, again, he just sticks to miles. Did I say Clarkson? I meant to say Clarkson. Moving on.
Right.
Third word.
Economic.
Oh dear, Nicky. The odd one out again.
Well, I'm just trying to just do it wrong, but I know all the answers, really.
It doesn't mean you're wrong. We're just trying to gauge what people say. I mean,
yes,
with economic, there's not really a correct way of saying it. I think it's more of a generational thing. You tend to find older speakers and older newsreaders will say economic, and younger people will say economic. But even so, that doesn't ring true all the time. But I would say economic's generally more common. And if you go to the Brotherton Library and borrow the Oxford English Guide to BBC pronunciation, they put economic before economic.
Can I just make a very quick observation with that? Shouldn't it not technically be economic, because there's E, which is vowel, then you've got C consonant, Carol, and then another vowel, and then you've got another consonant.
No, I know what you mean. You just meant the magic E.
The magic E, the magic E. So it's eco. If it was a double C, if it was like ECCO, then it would be economic.
Yeah.
There's so many rules.
To be honest, I don't know.
But technically, I would have said, linguistically, it was right to be economic.
I think it comes down to the way that people have been taught to read. I think it does. I think because around the sort of time that I know, definitely for me and Alex, because we're the same age, around the time that we were being taught to read, there were all sorts of new things being changed, and all sorts of people saying, "Oh, you should teach a child to read like this and like that."
National literacy strategy.
Yeah, it was very different. So I just think that the way that people have been taught to read has quite a big impact. Because I've never heard that before. What you were just talking about magic E. What's magic E?
I've not heard of that.
Yeah,
but when we talk about, you said that the E comes before the C, but yeah, ecology, I tend to say ecological, eco-friendly, and then I often make the joke there's nothing eco-friendly about economics. But then if both of them are spelt the same way, they both got eco at the beginning, surely they should both be economics or ecology or whatever.
Yeah,
so,
but there's so many irregularities and
that's, we'll leave it to you at home. If you think you know the correct way, please do get in touch. And also we love the feedback. We've had lots of positive feedback, so thank you to everyone who listened to the first episode. Thank you to those who point out mistakes that Nicky and I make. I said
many of them.
I said me and Emma, and I meant to say Emma and I. So if anyone spotted that, thank you for bringing it up.
Of course.
It was, of course, deliberate. And that is all we've got time for. So as always, we are followed here on lsrfm.com by The Lowdown. And thank you to our special guest today, Rob Cahill. I accidentally mispronounced his name last episode as Rob Cahill. I do apologise, Rob.
That's fine.
It's a common error. And that is all we've got time for. Here are the advertisements, and we'll see you next week.
The sound of students in Leeds.
I hear your heartbeat to the beat of the drums. Drums.
The moment you've all been waiting for.
Live from Leeds University Union.
The sound of students in Leeds.